Yuji Itadori and Gon Freaks, two names that any anime fan would recognize. With immense power and an unwavering determination to see justice dealt to those who wronged them, these two fan favorites have pushed past their limits time and time again. But just how strong are they? And who would win if these two powerhouses were to fight? Well, that's what I'll be going over today. For the battleground, I think it makes the most sense to have it take place in a generic city. Both characters are used to fighting in open fields, in enclosed spaces and forested areas, so a city would give us a combination of all those places while not giving either one a direct advantage. Both characters will also be at their strongest, so current manga Yuji versus adult Gon. With that out of the way, let's start by talking about stats and abilities. Even though it doesn't really matter for a versus battle scenario, it is still fun to talk about lifting strength, and here Gon completely outclasses Yuji, whose best feat is being able to throw a car, which by no means isn't impressive, but when you compare that to Gon, who, while not having awakened Nen or done any real training, can fish up and run around with a 3-ton fish, it's pretty obvious who is the physically superior out of the two. Ability-wise, both characters have long and close range options, Yuji having excellent hand-to-hand combat and blood manipulation allowing him to shoot off long-range attacks, and Gon having both rock and scissors for close-range scenarios, and paper for long-range attacks. But Yuji is definitely more versatile. Blood manipulation on its own gives Yuji multiple close and long-range options, while in general just being more deadly than anything Gon has. But as of chapter 257, Yuji has also gotten his own version of Sukuna's curse technique, Shrine. While Sukuna can fire out his slashes and use his fingers as knives, Yuji's version works by manifesting marks on whatever he touches. These marks then get cut, which results in whatever the marks were on getting sliced apart. And while not officially recognized as a curse technique as of chapter 257, Yuji still has the ability to weaken the soul with every punch he lands. Nen isn't directly stated to come from the soul and is instead something that comes from living bodies, so it's unclear if the soul punch would actually affect Gon's Nen or not. For the actual important stats like AP and speed, I think it's easier to start with Yuji's power, as Gon's AP is a bit ambiguous and up for debate. The reason Yuji is so easy to scale is because he's clearly able to damage Sukuna with his punches, and his cleave-like ability is strong enough to just straight up cut off Sukuna's leg. And Sukuna actually thinks that Yuji's punches are a bigger threat than Shrine. This probably isn't directly related to power, but we still see that his Black Flash is able to break the skin and make Sukuna bleed. Sukuna would then scale to a feat like Gojo's Earthquake that he generated upon being released from the prison realm, a feat that can be calced anywhere from mountain to country level. But not only is the mountain level scaling more consistent with the rest of the verse, but the country calc itself is more of a high-end or kind of a wank for the feat, which means that Yuji's Black Flash would then scale to around the 100 megaton ranges, whereas his normal punches would more likely be high city level. The reason I said Gon scaling was harder is because we don't really know where he scales to within the verse. On one end we know that he's stronger than someone like Pito, who we know is the strongest of the royal guards, which would mean he scales above Yuppie, who can destroy the ground, making massive craters that would require small city levels of power. But on the other hand, you could argue that he is somewhat weaker than Rose Meruem, if not relative to him. This is because Rose Meruem, in simple terms, is just Meruem plus Yuppie and Poof. Now, I'm not saying Rose Meruem is just Yuppie and Poof's power added onto him. He's clearly more powerful than that, but it's still worth noting because Gon is in a completely different league compared to someone who is stronger than both Yuppie and Poof. Which means that you could easily argue that Gon would have some relativity to Rose Meruem. But to play it safe, I'll just say Gon simply downscales from Meruem. So that begs the question. How strong is Meruem? And that is actually very simple to answer. Meruem is able to vaporize the side of a small mountain. When calculating this, the energy output Meruem showed is equal to around 400 megatons of TNT. Downplaying Gon from this, it's fair to say that he would land in the 100 megaton ranges. pretty similar to Yuji, only difference here being that Yuji reaches that with his Black Flash, while Gon can output that much power with his normal punches. So I'm going to have to give the slight edge to Gon, but AP isn't everything, so who is faster? This time I'll start with Gon. By far the most impressive speed feat in Hunter x Hunter is Pito being able to blitz Gon, Killua, and Kite from a very long distance away. Killua at this time in the story is confident that he could take on tanks and fighter jets with no difficulty, which would imply that he can also react to things like artillery weapons, which is consistent as Killua has also shown to be able to react to bullets, which means that Killua would then have around supersonic plus reaction speeds. Pito was located roughly 4,000 meters away, and for Pito to blitz them from that distance and in that short of a time frame, he would have needed to move around 1.5% the speed of light. That sounds like a massive outlier, I know, but it really isn't. Killua has shown that he's able to move in tandem with electricity that is powerful enough to count as lightning speed. I have a video on TikTok going over what counts as lightning speed if you're interested, and Killua even has an ability that is literally called Speed of Lightning. And this most likely lightning speed Killua can't even process what is happening when Gon fights Pito. With Subrail being around 8 times faster than lightning speed, it's not unfair to say that Gon and Pito moving so fast Killua couldn't even blink would back up the subrelativistic scaling. In fact, Gon should be closer to 3% the speed of light, as Pito can actually double the force of their jump that they used against Gon and Killua. And of course, Gon just completely outscales this Pito. If you don't want to go with the subrelativistic end, like I said, Gon is still faster than Godspeed, which would make him massively hypersonic plus at the bare minimum. And before anyone brings up Netero being hyped up for breaking the sound barrier as a way of downplaying the verse to supersonic, there are far too many feats in the series to get the verse above that level of speed for it to be considered a valid argument. And by the same logic, the Jujutsu Kaisen verse would also get cut down to these supersonic ranges. For the longest time, or like the last 200 days, Jujutsu Kaisen speed scaling has been a hot topic, and it all started with Kashimo using electromagnetic waves to attack Sukuna, and Sukuna then dodging these attacks. With this feat coming out at around 78% the speed of light, it's no surprise that it's so talked about, especially when the second best speed scaling for the verse is lightning speed. But there's always been a discussion around if this feat is valid or not, and the main reason for that is the Black Flash. As it is explained, the Black Flash occurs when the physical punch and the cursed energy land within 1/1,000,000th of a second of each other. And this would then mean that no character could be above the mid-massively hypersonic plus levels of speed, as any character faster than that would never get hit by both the physical punch and the cursed energy, because the time frame between them landing for just a sub-relativistic character would be more than enough time for them to just move away before the cursed energy hits. But Gojo completely destroys this notion in a recent chapter, as he says that if the time frame was accurate, he could land the Black Flash whenever he wants. And as such, there is no real reason Sukuna shouldn't be relativistic plus. Yuji would then downscale from a fatigued and weakened Sukuna, so him being at least in the sub-relativistic plus to relativistic ranges would be more than fair. While this fight would be closer than most people think, Yuji would most likely win in the end, and I don't think he would have too much trouble. Sure, Gon is stronger, but it's not to a degree where he could just one-shot Yuji. I imagine the fight going something like this. Gon and Yuji start by throwing hands, but Gon can't really land any of his attacks because he isn't fast enough, and Yuji isn't doing any real damage to Gon. Then Yuji gets into the zone and starts landing multiple Black Flashes, which would have an effect on Gon. However, when Yuji gets into the zone like this, we see that he doesn't really dodge attacks and just kind of walks through them instead. So Gon would most likely be able to land a powerful hit on Yuji here. I could even see him landing the same combo he did on Pito, kicking Yuji into the air and then landing a full power rock. This would do considerable damage to Yuji, but because of RCT, Yuji could pretty easily just heal himself back to full health. Yuji would then realize that punches aren't going to really work here, and then he would just go in for the killing blow with Shrine as he cuts Gon's head off with one foul swoop. And because of the speed advantage he has, I don't think Yuji would have a problem landing this, and as such Yuji would win this fight pretty easily. I could see a possibility where it's a stalemate, as Gon could use all of his Nen to just obliterate Yuji like he did against Pito, but this would also just result in Gon being practically dead, which I would count as a stalemate. So Yuji most likely wins like 9 times out of 10. If you liked this video and you want to see more, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed, and if you want to join my Discord server where you can make suggestions for future videos, see all the calcs I use, and just get better at power scaling, I'll have a link for that in the description below.